Welcome, driver education summer students. This is Mr. Wade, and this is the Chapter 10 Negotiating Intersection discussion. As you found out in Chapter 5, identifying is a critical part of your driving experience. You are beginning to see things you weren't aware of, and identifying intersections will be one of those. Also, helping you to identify intersections and how to negotiate will help you to increase your knowledge and safe driving habits. As we go through this presentation, I want you to be aware that many things are highlighted, underlined, or in bold type. This can be a benefit to you for better knowledge that will help you possibly in the test. But again, you are able to pause, rewind, or replay this discussion or presentation at a later date if need to. So what are we going to talk about and what are the objectives in searching intersections? You need to know how to identify them. What actions do you take to approach them? And what do you do if something's closed in the zone in front of you? And that we'll be talking about later also. Intersections. And here we see a definition for intersections, places where roadways meet or cross. And generally, crossing pattern is the type of intersection most common with, but you'll be noticing as you drive more and more around Oak Park and other cities and other states that there are other patterns. But the two basic ones are the cross and the T. The chance of a collision at intersection is greater than any other point on the roadway. You have many other users on the roadway, other vehicles, other types of vehicles, other pedestrians. So the chance of a collision is greater there because of the crossing pattern. So this is why you need to know those IPE skills to help you understand what to do. Further discussing identifying intersections, the basic means of identifying intersections, as you see here in blue, traffic lights, traffic signs, and more likely, yes, crossing traffic. Okay. When you approach an intersection, what are you going to be searching for? What things are in your path of travel? Are there these street signs? Are there street lights? Is it a stop sign? Are there roadway markings giving you information about what you're going to see ahead as in regards to a traffic light or a stop sign? Are there pedestrians? Remember, as I said earlier, you're going to now start to see things and notice things you have not been paying attention to because you are now the driver behind the wheel of a car. This slide is giving you some critical locations that help you with your searching and identifying what actions you need to take at an intersection. The 12 to 15 second location is basically putting you about a block ahead of that intersection. This is going to allow you to get more information to know if you're going to need to slow or stop or, again, change lanes. And I didn't mention this earlier, but all patterns or all streets or all roadways are not always two-way with traffic moving in each direction. You may have streets like North Avenue in Harlem where there's multiple lanes traveling in either direction. So you may need to know how to slow or stop or change lanes. The 42nd position is basically about mid-block or halfway towards or near that intersection. And you're going to widen or increase your line of sight so that you're able to see more sense of what's going on at the intersection. At 2 seconds, you either have made the decision that you need to stop or you know that it is safe to proceed through. So you're going to have to evaluate as you approach an intersection. And that's why those locations were very critical. This slide is just pointing out to you that as you approach, you're going to see what other restrictions might be in your line of sight or your path of travel, and you're going to increase your line of sight looking so you can identify any potential hazards so that if you have to pause slightly or yield, you can do so based upon the situation. When we talk about, this slide talks about point of no return. We're generally talking about an area in which you have an intersection that's controlled by a traffic light. So point of no return becomes very important skill that you're going to have to learn how to adjust to and adapt to. But the definition of a point of no return is that point beyond which, the point beyond which you can no longer stop safely without entering the intersection. You probably encountered as you've been approaching a green light and you see it going yellow, or you may have seen your parents when you were passengers approaching a green light that's going yellow, and you find yourself knowing that you have to react. And sometimes you may find yourself braking hard or quickly because you don't want to go through the red light. But what we're going to talk about, what this slide is pointing out to you, the point of no return means that you can no longer stop safely, so you want to proceed straight ahead. This is something that when you get in the car and behind the wheel instruction will give you better insight, or this is something as you are riding with your parents, you can discuss with them as to how have they learned how to handle an approaching green light that's about to turn yellow, and if you know that you're at the point of no return or not. But if you must stop, and when you do, primarily because there's a red light or a yield sign or the stop sign, you know you must stop. Okay? This is just pointing out that because you know you must stop, that as you proceed to brake so that you can make that stop, you want to cover your brake or tap it gently and slowly so that you can come to a nice slow stop so you can communicate to those behind you that you're coming to a stop. So where are you required to make a legal stop? At most intersections, you have a painted stop line, or there's also a painted crosswalk. But if neither are present, you're going to stop before the intersection. So by stopping at the legal stop allows you to see if it's clear for you to go through the intersection. But if for any reason there is a restriction to your line of sight that you can't see clearly, or there are buildings, or you're in a residential street in which there's shrubbery, or you can't see clearly down the intersection or the roadway that you're going to enter, either left or right, you can do a safety stop. So by making that legal stop, you're giving yourself enough room to move up ahead to see clearly before you proceed through the intersection, before you enter that intersection, so you're not becoming a hazard. One thing you also want to know and learn how to do is where to give yourself room when you come stopping or coming to a stop behind a stopped vehicle, which will be at a red light or at a stop sign. As this slide indicates, you want to stop where you can see rear tires touching the pavement. That means that you're going to have enough movement around the vehicle so that if there's some reason that there's a reason you can't, this car in front of you can't proceed, you have the ability to proceed around them safely. So enter an intersection. When can you enter it, or when may you enter a section? If the light is green and the path is open. What this slide is pointing out in the underlined sections is that this relates to turns. Your last check should be in your intended path of travel. Well, if you're moving straight through, your path of travel is clearly in front of you, so there is no last check. The last check really refers to making turns. So if you're going to make a left turn or a right turn, your last check should be in that direction that you're traveling during and after a turn. Now we're going to look at that most other important skill that you're going to learn to acquire in your driving knowledge base is determining right of way and judging gaps. So the objective here in this section is to help you understand what the right of way is, describe when you must yield the right of way, and the other important thing, how long will it take for you to cross and make that left or right turn? What is right of way? Right of way is described and defined as the privilege of having use of a certain part of a roadway, immediate use of that roadway or that intersection. You have the right of way only when the other driver gives it to you. You have already maybe learned some things from your parents about who has the right of way, like the driver on the right has the right of way if two vehicles approach an intersection at the same time. But remember, you only have the right of way when other drivers gives it to you. Most drivers don't remember the rule or ignore that rule. So you will often have to yield or let other drivers go first. You're going to yield at fresh green lights because, again, you want to be sure that you can proceed through the intersection safely, because you don't want to cause a collision because of someone who may be trying, who may not try, but may be running a red light. But you also want to be courteous to others like pedestrians. When deciding whether or not to yield, you don't want to cause another car that's in that intersection to slow, stop, or change their path of travel. You never want to allow someone to be a hazard in an intersection. You want them to be able to clear through. So, knowing that, do not assume others will always yield to you. When other drivers do not yield to you, you do not want them to be the cause, or you do not want to cause them to have to slow, stop while they're in that intersection. Always be courteous, and remember, even though you have the right of way by law, always allow the others to go first. Do not assume that they will yield to you. So these next few slides, you're going to see some examples of right of way. As you see in front of you right now, we have yielding at a stop sign and yielding at a fresh green light or traffic signs. Again, those are the two most common means by which you can identify that you're at an intersection. But what I want to point out to you, a couple of things. One, you see crossing traffic and you see pedestrians. Well, your first yield is going to be to those pedestrians. And again, you're always going to yield to traffic that is in an intersection. You want them to clear out before you proceed through. In these examples, you now see another example of a type of intersection. The top two refer to a T intersection. One is controlled with a yield sign. One has no control signs. But again, you're yielding the right of way to pedestrians and then crossing traffic. The ones at the bottom show you examples of always yielding to emergency vehicles, even though you may have the green light. And the one on the bottom right is saying that even though you have your green light, your intention is to make a left turn, and left turn traffic always yields to approaching oncoming traffic, and you're always yielding to pedestrians. These next two are showing you again examples of your basic cross traffic design. In this case, the one on the left shows you a four-way stop. And what's good about this one to know is that the decision is who has the right of way. Is it the yellow car or the white car? By law, it would be the white car, and they're probably going to go first. But because of your case, you have the pedestrian. That white car definitely is going to have the opportunity to go first because you're yielding to the pedestrian. The one on the right is an uncontrolled intersection. And again, because of your actions, be it either to go straight or to make a left turn, you're going to yield to crossing traffic, pedestrians, and oncoming traffic. Now, we talked about you're going to need to learn that idea of judging the size of a gap, as this slide is indicating. So the definition is the gap is the distance between two vehicles. So if we look at this diagram, we're knowing now that the size of a gap in distance is based upon the amount of time that you have in order to get through that intersection. The top of the graph, the columns are showing the time it takes to cross the traffic at 4 to 5 seconds, turning right and joining traffic at 6 seconds, which we talked about earlier, and turning left and joining traffic being 7 seconds. So if you recall what we talked about earlier about searching for ahead to see if an intersection, your first search is about a block ahead, which is at 12 to 15 seconds. So in this diagram, we can see that the white car being a block away is going to take 12 to 15 seconds to reach the intersection that the yellow car is at. So if you're in the yellow car, you decide that you want to cross traffic or make a right or left turn, you will notice that you will know that because of the 12 to 15 seconds that the white vehicle has, you have the time in which to make that decision to go through that intersection. Again, turning right or left into lanes of other traffic is joining that traffic. Making a right or left turn means you're entering traffic, you're entering lanes that has other traffic present, so you're joining traffic. In many cases, you're going to learn and need to develop the ability to accelerate, to allow you to go through that intersection to join traffic safely. But remember, turning left is more dangerous than turning right. If you recall that previous slide, it showed that turning left takes 6 to 7 seconds, where turning right may only be between 4 to 6 seconds. So turning left is more dangerous than turning right. Controlled intersections. You're going to know the procedures for doing so, how to identify, how to take actions when a light is green, yellow, or red. What actions should you make and take with unprotected left turns and for turning right on red. A controlled intersection sign is one that has traffic signs or signals that will help you determine your right of way. A controlled intersection is one that has traffic signs or signals. So if we look at those controlled intersections with signs, the two prevalent ones you will have will be the stop and the yield. Well, the stop one is very simple in the sense that you know you must come to a full stop, as we talked earlier, at the painted stop line or at the painted crosswalk or before the intersection before entering it. The one you'll have a little bit more need to practice at is the yield sign, because you're slowing, you're not coming to a stop. The only time you will stop at the yield sign is that when the crossing traffic is not yielding the right of way to you, or as in this example, you're joining traffic on the expressway. So you're going to learn how to slow and yield the right of way to other vehicles that are going through that street. So with controlled intersections with signals, you always have to be sure that you're in the correct lane for your path of travel. It talks about predicting. It talks about signals having more than 3 lights, such as the green arrow, and we're going to talk about that more in a minute. This is just pointing out that, again, not all roadways are 2-lane traffic. They are multiple lane, and they also may have left turn lanes. And you have to identify where the left turn lane and know that because you're making a left turn, you need to be in that lane. If you look at the examples too on the right, you can see your basic traffic light only has 3 lamps, with the red at the top, yellow in the middle, and green at the bottom. Whereas one on the left, we've seen multiple lights, which will indicate some needs for understanding that you're at a protected left turn. Fresh green light, still green light, and you're learning and practicing driving and negotiating intersections with controlled traffic lights. You need to understand what this means. Fresh green light means you have been waiting at that red light, waiting for it to go green so you can proceed. Once it goes green, you're going to observe to make sure there are no restrictions, no hazards, that you can proceed through, and that becomes a fresh green light. It has just turned green. The stale green light is one that's been on for a long time, and generally that's the one you're going to see for the first time from a block ahead or after making a turn. Once you're identified, you are going to need to be prepared to slow down, because again, you're going to learn how to react and respond and know that if you're in the point of no return location. Yellow lights, you're going to have to decide whether to stop or proceed. Proceed means are you at the point of no return? You're going to better understanding of that in the car as to when you're at the right location to proceed through the yellow light. But again, as you approach an intersection and the light is green, you're going to assume it's going to go yellow, and you're going to slow down in order so you can stop if the light turns red on you. But again, if the light is red, you know you must stop. Check your rear zone for stopping and come to a complete stop for that red light. Turning left. Most of the left turns you're making is an unprotected left turn. That means that there's only 3 lamps or 3 lights at your traffic light: the red, the yellow, and the green. And that is the majority of the intersections that you're going to come across. And most of them do not have a protected left turn, so we call them an unprotected left turn. When you are waiting to make a unprotected left turn, you're always yielding to oncoming traffic. So when you make a protected left turn, you're going to have a signal or a sign that says when a left turn signal make a left turn while oncoming traffic is stopped. It might be a green light or a green arrow. The thing to remember is that in many cases, it will happen to you that there will be other vehicles waiting or proceeding through with a protected left turn green arrow. And as you approach it, that arrow may go away and you are just left with a green light. So then you have to wait and yield to oncoming traffic. A delayed green light just means, and that's not often seen around here in this area, a delayed green light means that oncoming traffic is still approaching on the green, even though you may have a red light. The other important skill you're going to learn how to make is turning on a red light. And all states allow vehicles to turn right on red, but the rules are this. If it is legal before turning right on red, you must come to a full legal stop. That means stopping at that painted stop sign line or at the crosswalk, but a full legal stop. You have to wait at least a few seconds if your intention was to make a right turn. You yield any right of way to any approaching vehicle that's making a left turn in front of you, but in all cases, yield to pedestrians. And your position for your turn for a right turn will be in the lane nearest to you, which is the lane generally towards the curb side. Again, you must always come to a full legal stop before making a right turn on red, and you yield to pedestrians. One thing you will be noticing more now is that there are those signs that say warning, red light camera, which is monitoring an intersection to make sure that vehicles making a right turn come to a full legal stop. Uncontrolled intersections. I think you saw earlier, but we're going to again tell you how to identify an uncontrolled intersection, what actions you should take to approach it, and describe some of the restrictions you may have on that. Again, remember, who has the right of way depends upon who is going to give you. Never assume someone else is going to give you the right of way. An uncontrolled intersection has no signs, no signals to regulate traffic, which makes it very, very dangerous intersection. We already know that intersections are the most dangerous of all parts of the roadway. Again, 80% of all incidents occur at intersections. But since an uncontrolled intersection has no signs or signals, there's greater potential for collisions or problems at an intersection with yielding the right of way. So you're going to always treat it as a yield. You're going to approach, once you identify that that intersection is uncontrolled in either direction, you're going to treat it as if it's a yield sign, meaning slow and be prepared to stop if you have to. Now, again, most of your uncontrolled intersections will occur in residential areas. And again, pedestrians always have the right of way. So what you must do, again, you're going to pay attention to those critical locations where you're going to be searching to be sure you know what type of intersection you're at. So remember the rules that we did before. You may want to pause and just look at this slide to remind yourselves of what the 12 to 15 seconds position does for you, where the 4 to 6 seconds does for you, and most importantly, which decisions you have to make when you're near and approaching that intersection. So again, identifying intersections, you must always have a line of sight. You don't want to have any restrictions. If you feel you are having any kind of line of sight restrictions, as this slide indicates, reduce your speed. Most importantly, reduce your speed so that you can slowly approach to be sure that you have no path of traffic restrictions, particularly if you have the green light. So what are the procedures must you follow in uncontrolled intersections? There's that rule about when two or more vehicles reach the intersection at the same time, the driver on the left must yield to the driver on the right. In many cases, again, never assume you are the driver on the right and that other driver is going to give you the right of way. Or you're going to learn how to determine if that driver is going to give the right of way, but you always must be ready to stop because of the actions of the other driver. This is a clear example of how to look at this, who has the right of way, and that law of if two cars approach the intersection at the same time, who should yield the right of way. So if we look at this, the red car is the car on the right. You're the driver in the yellow car. So with it being a four-way stop, if you both approach it at the same time, the rule says the car on the right, the red car, has the right of way. But in many cases, if you're the driver in the red car and you say you have the right of way, Never assume that the other vehicle, such as the driver in the yellow car, remember the rules or oppose that rule, and it's going to allow you to go first. You're going to learn how to notice the actions of the driver, the movement of the car, to know that the car is not going to allow you to have the right of way. So you're going to yield or stop and wait to allow that traffic to clear. So there are other, as this slide indicates, other intersections that you may encounter. And this is talking about railroad crossings. So this section is going to allow you to distinguish between what type of railroad crossings, again, remembering that railroad crossings are intersections because they are crossing a roadway. And you're going to be able to tell the difference between what's passive and what's active and what action should you take at a railroad crossing. Railroad crossings. What's important about him? Because trains, they're massive. Their starting distances are longer than those of a vehicle, obviously. Even though our tracks here are elevated, you've seen freight trains, you've seen metro trains, and you know they're long and they're always moving. So a moving train always has the right of way. Again, a moving train always has the right of way. So how do you identify if you're at a railroad crossing? The first thing, you're going to see that round yellow sign that has the cross box and the two R's. It says railroad crossing painted on them. And in residential streets areas, they're usually 250 feet from that railroad crossing. And in rural country settings, they're going to be 750 feet from the crossing. And generally in rural areas, all that you will see maybe is just that crossbuck that has railroad crossing painted on them. And it's just that crossing X sign that you will see. But again, in residential settings, it's about 250 feet from a railroad crossing, 750 feet from rural situations. So if you're in residential settings, most railroad crossings are called controlled or active. They're actively telling you that a train is about to approach, that train is approaching. The lights will flash, the red lights will flash. You will hear the bells ring, and the crossing gate comes down and closes and stops traffic from going across that railroad crossing. So we always must make a complete stop and remain stopped until all lights and all actions of that crossing ceases and stops. So it means that the lights stop, they're no longer flashing, and the gate is raised. We never proceed through that crossing or to our path of travel until that gate is up, and never do we drive around a lowered gate. It is legal, it is deadly. It's there to precede you because that train has signaled for that crossing to become active. It is not preparing to stop. It can't stop safely. It takes about 1.5 miles for a moving train to come to a complete stop. And by the time you get those red bells flashing and ringing, the gate coming down, that train could be anywhere between 20 to 30 seconds from their crossing. So its intention is not to stop. It is signal for those gates to start actively warning you about its approachingness. So you will never, never drive around a lowered gate. Again, in rural areas, you will encounter railroad crossing, but they're passive. All you will have is a sign. You'll have that 750 warning sign ahead of the railroad crossing. So there will not be anything else that's telling you that a train is approaching. You may have a train knowing there's a crossing of a road over the tracks, and they may sound their horns. But in most cases, they don't. So you're going to have to be very cautious and approach it as a yield sign or a stop sign so that you can be sure that it's safe to go across that crossing. So this is what you will see primarily in rural areas. Before you saw this cross buck, there was that warning sign 750 feet ahead of this crossing. So again, you need to approach it slowly, yield, look, be sure it's safe, and then cross safely. Again, take precautions. Slow and ready to stop. Look both ways. Wait for all actions, particularly if it's an active railroad crossing, for actions to go away, for the gate to go up, for the red lights to stop and the bells to stop ringing. And drive only when you know it's safe to clear the tracks. This is an important thing to remember, that when you go across tracks, you want to be sure there's enough space for you to clear tracks on the other side. So before you would, even though the gates are up and the bells have stopped ringing and the red light is no longer present and you don't see a train, you want to be sure that when you go across those tracks, if there's other traffic present on the other side, that there's enough room for you to clear the tracks. There will be times in which you will clear a track or you are going across a track and the gates will start ringing and the gates will start coming down and the lights will start flashing because there's a train approaching about 20 seconds away that you weren't aware of because you were given a clear sign because of no activity by the sign to go through. The other thing to be cautious of is who else is at that track. There may be multiple tracks. You want to be, again, to be sure you have enough clearance to clear all of those tracks as you go over. The other thing we want to remind you of is that you will always be prepared to stop if you're following a school bus or a truck carrying hazardous material. All of these vehicles are required to stop and search and see that there is no train coming, even when there is no gate down. Obviously, with a gate down, you're going to stop behind that vehicle and they're going to stop at the crossing. But when there is no gate down and no red lights flashing and no bells ringing, school buses in particular are required to stop, let out their stop sign, open their front door, stop and listen and look before they proceed across. You're also going to want to be sure that if you're following a bus, the school buses, which are longer vehicles, you want to be sure that before you proceed across, that they have cleared the intersection or cleared this intersection, which is the railroad crossing, and be sure that you are going to have enough room for you to go across the tracks and be clear of the tracks. Now, this last section, I'm not going to talk a lot about. I'm going to just have you review it if you wish. Roundabouts are something that are not present readily a lot in our area or in our state or in other states. They're more prevalent in other countries, but it's just another means of controlling traffic through an intersection. So roundabouts are circles. And every driver who enters that circle are required to yield to traffic that is going through that circular area. So this is just to show you what it, well, I'm not going to show you that. But again, this is just something you're not going to encounter mostly or hardly at all in our area. So this concludes the presentation. Remember, you can always go back and review it. And in doing so, pay attention to all those things that are highlighted or bold print or underlined, and pause and review as needed. If you have any questions, Again, you can make contact with your instructor about this, particularly if you have questions about homework and other things.